My name is Adrian, and this is the story of how my life took a turn so dramatic that even I couldn't have predicted it. You know how people say hindsight is 2020? Well, let me tell you something. When you're standing in the middle of chaos, nothing feels clear. Not your choices, not your future, and certainly not your loyalty to the company you've poured years of your life into. Let me start from the beginning, because none of this makes sense without context. For the past 6 years, I've worked at Prestige Global Enterprises, PGE, one of those sprawling corporate giants where everyone pretends they're too important to hold the elevator for anyone else. It's a place where ambition runs thick in the air, like expensive cologne mixed with stale coffee. And me? I was just another cog in the machine, or so most people thought. I started as an entry-level analyst fresh out of college, eager and naive, believing all the motivational posters about teamwork and innovation. Over time, I climbed the ranks, not because I kissed up to anyone, but because I worked harder than anyone else. Late nights, early mornings, weekends spent poring over spreadsheets while my friends were out living their lives. I did it all. By the time I hit 32, I had earned my spot as Senior Vice President of Operations. Or so I believed. What no one knew, what almost no one knew, was that I wasn't just another executive on the payroll. My late grandfather, God rest his soul, had been one of the original founders of PGE. When he passed away 5 years ago, he left me a significant chunk of shares in the company. Not enough to control it outright, mind you, but more than enough to make some noise if I ever wanted to. The thing is, I never told anyone about this inheritance. Not my colleagues, not my closest friends, and definitely not HR. Why would I? At first, I didn't want special treatment. Then later, I realized keeping it quiet gave me power, the kind of power that comes from being underestimated. So there I was, sitting in my corner office on the 23rd floor, staring out at the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. Everything seemed normal, or as normal as things could be in a cutthroat environment like ours. That morning, though, something felt off. Maybe it was the way my new boss, Victor Langston, had breezed past me in the hallway without so much as a nod. Victor had only been with the company for 3 months, parachuted in from some hotshot consulting firm after the previous CEO retired unexpectedly. He was young, sharp-edged, and carried himself like he already owned the place. To say we didn't see eye to eye would be putting it mildly. Victor had made it clear from day one that he intended to shake things up. Translation: he planned to fire half the senior management team and replace them with his cronies. Some people called him visionary. Others whispered behind closed doors that he was reckless. Either way, his presence had turned our once stable workplace into a pressure cooker. That afternoon, I got summoned to Victor's office. His assistant, a timid woman named Rachel, who always looked like she was bracing for impact, handed me a terse email instructing me to report to his office immediately. No explanation, no pleasantries. Just 4 words: be here. Now. The walk down the hall felt longer than usual. Every step echoed against the polished marble floors, and I could feel eyes following me from cubicles and conference rooms. Rumors spread faster than wildfire at PGE, and by now, everyone knew layoffs were imminent. Still, I told myself not to panic. I had survived worse storms before. What possible reason could Victor have to target me? When I stepped inside his office, Victor barely glanced up from his laptop. His desk was immaculate. Every pen aligned perfectly, every document stacked neatly. It was the kind of workspace that screamed control freak, which, frankly, suited him perfectly. "Adrian," he said finally, closing his laptop with a decisive click. His tone was clipped, impersonal. "Take a seat." I sat down, smoothing my skirt over my knees. "You wanted to see me?" He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Let's cut to the chase. Your performance reviews haven't exactly been stellar lately. Missed deadlines, budget overruns, interdepartmental conflicts, it's all adding up. Frankly, I don't think you're the right fit for this role anymore." My stomach dropped. With all due respect, Victor, those issues were largely outside my control. If you'd care to look deeper. "I don't need to look deeper," he interrupted sharply. "This isn't personal, Adrian. It's business. Effective immediately, consider yourself terminated." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Terminated. Fired. Axed. Whatever term you wanted to use. It meant the same thing. I was done. Finished. Out of a job I'd fought tooth and nail to earn. For a moment, I couldn't speak. All the blood rushed to my ears, drowning out everything else. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not now. Not to me. But Victor's expression remained cold, unyielding. There was no room for negotiation, no chance to plead my case. He'd already made up his mind. "Pack your things and leave the building within the hour," he added almost casually. "Security will escort you out if necessary." I stood up, trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. "You'll regret this," I said quietly, though I'm not sure why. Threats weren't going to change anything, at least not yet. Victor smirked, clearly unfazed. "Doubtful. Have a nice life, Adrian." And just like that, I was dismissed. As I walked back to my office to gather my belongings, I tried to process what had just happened. How could someone who barely knew me decide my fate so callously? Did he really think getting rid of me would solve anything? More importantly, did he have any idea who I truly was? By the time I reached my desk, the whispers had started. People avoided making eye contact, pretending to be busy with their work, but I could feel their stares burning into my back. A few brave souls offered sympathetic smiles or murmured condolences, but most kept their distance. After all, in a place like PGE, showing solidarity with someone who'd fallen out of favor was practically career suicide. As I packed my files into a cardboard box, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Rachel, Victor's assistant. "Emergency board meeting scheduled for 4 p.m. today. Mandatory attendance for all executives. Don't miss it. Asterisk, asterisk." Great. Just what I needed. One last humiliation before I officially disappeared from the company forever. But as I stared at the notification, a slow smile crept across my face. Victor might think he'd won, but he had no idea what was coming next. Because today, at that meeting, the truth was finally going to come out, and trust me, it was going to change everything. The conference room was packed when I arrived, buzzing with tension. The long mahogany table was surrounded by familiar faces, each wearing expressions ranging from nervous anticipation to outright dread. Victor sat at the head of the table, looking smug and self-assured, as if he'd already claimed victory. Little did he know, the real battle was about to begin. Board meetings at PGE were usually dull affairs. Endless PowerPoint presentations, financial reports droned on ad nauseum, and polite disagreements masked by forced smiles. Today, however, the atmosphere crackled with energy. Something big was brewing, and everyone could feel it. The chairman of the board, Harold Whitaker, called the meeting to order with his usual gravitas. Harold was an older man, distinguished and deliberate, with a voice that commanded attention. He wasted no time diving into the agenda. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, scanning the room with piercing blue eyes, "we've convened today under unusual circumstances. Recent developments within the company have raised serious concerns about our leadership structure and strategic direction. Before we proceed, I'd like to address a critical matter involving one of our key stakeholders." At this, my heart skipped a beat. I hadn't expected them to bring it up so soon, or at all. Until now, my ownership stake had remained a closely guarded secret, known only to Harold and a handful of trusted advisors. Apparently, that was about to change. Harold turned to me, his gaze softening slightly. "Adrian, would you care to join us at the table?" Every head swiveled in my direction. Whispers erupted around the room as I rose from my seat and approached the front. Even Victor looked confused, though he quickly masked it with irritation. "What's this about?" he demanded, glaring at Harold. "She's not part of the executive team anymore." Harold ignored him, gesturing for me to take a seat beside him. Once I was settled, he addressed the room again. "Many of you may not be aware of this, but Adrian holds a substantial shareholding in PGE, approximately 15% of the company's total equity. This makes her one of our largest individual shareholders." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Chairs creaked as people shifted uncomfortably, trying to reconcile this revelation with their preconceived notions of who I was. Victor's face went pale, his jaw tightening as realization dawned. "You're joking," he muttered, though it was clear he didn't believe it. "I assure you, Mr. Langston, this is no joke," Harold replied coolly. "Adrian inherited these shares from her late grandfather, one of the company's founding members. She has chosen to remain discreet about her holdings until now, but recent events necessitate transparency. Victor shot me a venomous look, his earlier confidence crumbling. Why wasn't I informed of this sooner? Because it wasn't relevant to your position, Harold said firmly. Until today, Adrian preferred to operate independently of her shareholder status. However, given the abrupt termination of her employment, and action taken without consulting the board, we felt it imperative to clarify her role moving forward. The room fell silent, the weight of Harold's words sinking in. Everyone understood what this meant. Victor had overstepped. Big time. Firing a major shareholder without even knowing it was akin to signing his own death warrant within the company. For a moment, Victor struggled to recover. He cleared his throat, attempting to salvage whatever dignity he had left. Even so, her performance issues still stand. Shareholder or not, PG cannot afford mediocrity in its leadership ranks. That's rich coming from you, I interjected, unable to stay silent any longer. My voice was steady, laced with quiet fury. You've been here 3 months, Victor. 3 months. In that time, you've alienated half the staff, disrupted workflows, and created chaos under the guise of innovation. Meanwhile, I've spent 6 years building this division from the ground up. If anyone's guilty of mediocrity, it's you. Gasps echoed around the room, followed by murmurs of agreement. I could see doubt creeping into the faces of the other executives, their faith in Victor wavering. For the first time since he'd arrived, cracks were forming in his carefully constructed facade. Victor slammed his fist on the table, his composure slipping further. This is outrageous. You can't undermine my authority like this. Watch me, I shot back, leaning forward. Because as of today, I'm reclaiming my seat at this table, and I intend to exercise every right that comes with my shares, starting with demanding accountability for the reckless decisions you've made. The room erupted into heated debate, voices overlapping as alliances shifted and tempers flared. Harold banged his gavel repeatedly, calling for order. Through it all, I sat calmly, watching the dominoes fall. This was only the beginning. The chaos in the room only intensified as accusations flew back and forth. Victor, visibly flustered, tried to regain control of the meeting, but his authority had been shattered. The board members who had previously nodded along with his ideas now exchanged skeptical glances. Even Rachel, his assistant, looked uneasy as she scribbled notes furiously, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Harold Whitaker finally managed to restore some semblance of order by raising his voice above the din. Enough, he barked, slamming the gavel down one last time. The room fell silent, all eyes turning toward him. This is neither productive nor professional. We are here to address serious concerns about leadership and strategy, not engage in personal attacks. He turned to me, his expression softer but still firm. Adrian, you've raised valid points regarding Mr. Langston's management style and decision-making. However, your sudden reclamation of shareholder influence requires careful consideration. Would you like to formally present your case? I nodded, taking a deep breath. This was my moment, not just to reclaim what was rightfully mine, but to set things right for the company I devoted years of my life to. Thank you, Harold, I began, standing up so everyone could see me clearly. My voice was steady, filled with conviction. For 6 years, I've worked tirelessly to build PGE into the powerhouse it is today. I've faced challenges, made sacrifices, and delivered results. Results that speak for themselves. Yet, in just 3 short months, Victor has dismantled much of what we've achieved. Morale is at an all-time low. Key projects have stalled because of unnecessary restructuring. And now, without consulting the board or considering the implications, he's fired a major shareholder, a move that reflects both arrogance and incompetence. I paused, letting my words sink in before continuing. I'm not asking for special treatment because of my shares. What I am demanding is accountability. If Victor wants to lead this company, he needs to prove he can do so responsibly. But given his track record thus far, I propose we revisit his appointment as CEO and consider alternative leadership options. The room erupted again, this time with murmurs of agreement. Several board members nodded, whispering among themselves. One of them, Margaret Chen, spoke up. Adrian makes a compelling argument. Perhaps we should conduct a formal review of Victor's performance before proceeding further. Victor's face flushed red, his hands gripping the edge of the table. This is absurd. You're using technicalities to undermine me. Technicalities? I countered sharply. My 15% stake isn't a technicality, it's a fact. A fact you ignored when you decided to throw me out like yesterday's trash. If anything, you're the one undermining the company by failing to respect its stakeholders. Harold held up a hand to silence us both. That's enough. Clearly, emotions are running high. Let's take a step back and approach this rationally. Victor, I suggest you prepare a detailed report addressing Adrienne's concerns, including specific examples of how your initiatives have benefited the company. In the meantime, Adrienne, since you've chosen to disclose your shareholder status, we'll need to integrate you more actively into board discussions moving forward. Does that sound fair? Victor clenched his jaw, but didn't argue further. He knew he was cornered. Instead, he muttered something under his breath and stormed out of the room, leaving behind a palpable sense of relief. In the weeks that followed, the tide turned decisively in my favor. With my shareholder status now public knowledge, I became an integral part of the board's deliberations. Victor's attempts to defend himself fell flat. His so-called innovations were exposed as poorly thought-out schemes that prioritized optics over substance. Margaret Chen led an independent audit of his decisions, uncovering a series of costly mistakes that had gone unnoticed or unchallenged until now. Meanwhile, I worked closely with the remaining executives to stabilize the company. Together, we revived stalled projects, restored morale among employees, and implemented measures to ensure transparency and collaboration across departments. It wasn't easy. There were late nights, heated debates, and moments of doubt, but slowly, PGE began to heal. By the end of the quarter, the board convened once more to vote on Victor's future. The decision was unanimous. He was stripped of his title and replaced by someone more qualified, a seasoned executive named Daniel Reyes, who shared my vision for sustainable growth and ethical leadership. As for Victor, he left quietly, his reputation irreparably tarnished. With Daniel at the helm and my role officially expanded to include oversight of key strategic initiatives, PGE entered a new era. For the first time in years, I felt truly hopeful about the company's direction. And while I couldn't undo the pain of being fired or the betrayal of having my contributions dismissed, I found solace in knowing I'd fought back and won. One evening, as I stood in my office overlooking the city lights, Daniel joined me with 2 glasses of champagne. To second chances, he said, handing me a glass. To second chances, I echoed, clinking my glass against his. As I sipped the bubbly liquid, I reflected on everything I'd been through. Life had thrown me a curveball, but instead of letting it knock me down, I'd used it to swing harder and hit a home run. I was no longer just Adrienne, the overlooked executive. I was Adrienne, the woman who saved her company and herself from ruin. And that, I realized, was the happiest ending of all.